Hey everyone, welcome to Intellectual Month. So today is the first call right before we start a month. And this call is very special because we are gonna demystify writing. I am here today with Nadia Idle, and we're gonna talk about writer's flow and is writer's block a real thing? So let's get started and learn more about stopping overthinking and starting writing. So my guest today is Nadia Idle. She's another champion here in the Lifebook community. Nadia, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us why you're the right person to talk about this topic?
Okay, thanks, Anna. I'm really excited about this call. Thanks, everyone, for coming. So I'm Nadia Idle. I'm the social life coach champion here at Lifebook. And I am a copywriter and a workshop facilitator. And basically, I've been writing throughout my whole career for, the last 25 years. Writing has been a big part of what I do. So it's something that I do every day. But the main thing that I want to be talking about today is, how we can get into the writing flow. So I'll tell you a little bit about me and the kind of different writing that I have done and do, because that might spark your ideas as well. But today we're mainly going to focus on like the getting started, like getting the stuff down on the white page. So a little bit of background on me, a few more details. So I'm actually published in nonfiction. I edited a book called Tweets from Tahrir, which is the first book to tell the story of a live action, the uprising in Egypt in tweets. So it's the first book to tell the story in tweets. That was an editorial job. It seems like a long time ago now, 2011. But I've also, throughout my whole career, done blog posts, like strategic documents. I do copywriting for all sorts of different clients. So writing, and having to write fast and produce stuff has always been part of what I've done. But that doesn't mean that writing is easy for me, or is still easy. The main thing that I'm going to focus talking about today is not the nonfiction stuff, even though the nonfiction stuff is also, in a way, I apply the same process, which we'll talk about in a bit. But I have written a full-length 94,000 word novel, and if you would have told me in 2016 that I would achieve that, I would not have believed you, and I would have said, how do you write 94,000 words? So that's the main thing that I want to focus on, is that mindset and what happens when you think, oh, as Yvonne was saying at the beginning of this call, I feel like I have a writer within me. And I can tell you that everybody has a writer within them, but we're going to get into some of those things to demystify what writing is in a second. So I hope that was a good introduction, Anna. Is that good? Shall we start from there?
Yeah. Nadia, you need to unmute yourself. Yes.
Okay. Can everyone hear me now? Okay, great.
Yes, we can.
So are you happy for me to move on to writing is not editing? Okay. Okay, everyone, if there is one thing you take away from this session, it is that writing and editing are two completely different processes. They employ different processes in your brain, and they need to be removed from each other. So what we're going to focus on today is how you get that free flow writing. Because the sides of your brain that the side of your brain that writes a story or writes a memoir or comes up with a philosophical or political idea or connects different thoughts together or sees something that happens outside and incorporates it into your life story to write a piece of fiction is a completely different skill to the skill that then at a way later date, and I would argue way later, not that day, not even that week, looks at that piece of writing. I mean, if we're writing fiction, right? So if you're writing an article, you might have to do it later in that day and a different timeline. But the part of your brain that's looking at that document and saying, is that idea in the right order? Is that any good? Do I need somebody else to read this? Is not the brain that you want to employ when you're getting started and you're faced with the white page. So that's the main thing. If there's one thing you're taking out of this workshop, please let it be that don't worry about the quality of the stuff, because that is all we're talking about now is the scaffolding. So that's the first thing. So a really important point in terms of demystifying writing is, guys, it's just a job. It's just something else where you need to show up to work. Now, sure, any skill or any craft that you become good at then has that kind of magical power. If you're a great craftsman or craftswoman who is amazing at building tables, you didn't get into the craft of carpentry from the get-go. You couldn't do that, but you got to a point where you could. Now, that might seem obvious, but it seems to not be obvious to most novice writers when talking about writing. So why am I bringing it up and making that parallel? Because what you need to do, and this is what we're going to talk about, is to literally think about yourself as a bricklayer, and you're putting one brick in front of the other, because you cannot think about the furniture you're going to put in the house if you haven't built the house yet. So when you put one brick in front of the other, you've still got to do the cement. You've still got to, put in the internal walls. You've still got to do all of these different things, but it doesn't work to worry about those in the beginning. So what we're going to focus on is, how do you get yourself to a place where you can put one brick in front of the other, right? So that's the main thing that I want you to think about. Now, we are crossing over from Health and Fitness Month to Intellectual Month, and I want everyone to take all of the learnings from health and fitness and apply that on writing. So what do I mean by that? With health and fitness, there is no amount of thinking about getting fit that is going to make you fit. You actually need to do the thing. So I would say that, like running, like yoga, like, recovering from an illness and starting just to do a few steps to the kitchen, if you have had a terrible injury, those are all things that need to be actually done. And it's in the slow practice of starting to do the thing that actually produces the stuff, right? So that means that what we're looking for at this stage is a practice, not thinking about the practice, not worrying about the practice, but thinking, if I'm starting from something, if I can write 10 words a day, that is 10 words more than I had yesterday. And that's 10 words closer to my goal of writing a memoir, writing a book, or just putting down these ideas that I don't even know what they're going to end up being. So again, this is a one step at a time process. So before we move on, and there is going to be time for questions, so, jot those down. There's one of my favorite quotes that I want to end this section on, which has, served me really well all of these years, and definitely through writing my novel. And it is that writing is 30% creativity, okay? And we all have that, because that's what makes us a human, okay? We all have the creativity to produce art, and the creativity comes from the inside out. And what art is imposing structure on that creativity. But we're not going to worry about that, because the structure that you're imposing is editor's brain, which we'll talk about later. But the creativity that's coming up from within you, that's 30% of what writing is, which is 30% of what any art form is. And 30%, the other 30% is the craft. Now, the craft is the stuff you learn from other people. It's the stuff you learn from coming to this workshop. It's the stuff you learn through reading books. It's the stuff you learn also through the practice. Like, that is the craft. Again, useful to use the analogy of, running, yoga, building a house, carpentry. like thinking about it in terms of any other thing that you're doing. And that's stuff that you learn, and then you can learn the rules and then break the rules, etc., like with any art form. So that's 30% creativity and 30% is the craft. Now, the other 40%, ladies and gents and future writers of the world, is stamina. And no one can teach you stamina. Stamina is the self-discipline, as you know, we're all life bookers here, that John and Missy talk about, where you wake up every day or every afternoon or whatever, and you just do the work. And there are some days where you're going to think, I'm amazing, this is going to be the best book ever, I'm so happy I'm doing this is going to launch my career. And there are going to be other days where you think, this is the worst thing ever, why am I doing this is a waste of time. And that doesn't matter. That's somebody, that's a voice talking up here. You still have to show up to work, and you still have to do the work. And like I said, 10 words today is 10 words more than you had yesterday. So those are my top line tips. I hope that was helpful. This is stuff that I've learned over the years. And so again, writing is not editing. It's not about the quality. It's about producing the stuff. And that's what we want to focus on.
That was really great, Nadia, and a great segue into my next question, which is, what techniques did you use to keep yourself motivated and focused, and keep that stamina, especially on those days when you don't feel like it?
Yeah, when you really don't feel like it. Okay. Thanks for asking this question, Anna. It's an important question, and I usually get frustrated when I go to talks by all of my literary heroes or my favorite journalists, and they're unable to answer a question, or they don't like answering a question about their process. And I think that is something valuable to share. So I will share what my process is. It might not work for other people, but it might work for you. So I use a technique called the Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro as in tomato. You can look this up on online. And it's a concept around any kind of workflow. I'm sure some people would have heard about it if you work in business or entrepreneurship. It's this idea of working in sprints, that the brain can only focus for 25 minutes. And if you tell yourself that you've got 25 minutes, then there's a break afterwards. So what I do is I work on a timer. I put a 25-minute, if I'm free writing for fiction, I put 25-minute timer on. I put the music related to the project that I'm doing. This might not work for people. I can't listen to random music. I can't listen to radio. It has to be either, like focus music or music related to a specific project that I'm doing. And then I free write for 25 minutes. And I mean, like, I don't stop. Like, there has to be something that is in the way, interrupting me, but I try and just write for 25 minutes. Then when the bell goes, unless I'm really right in the middle of an idea, I then get up, and physically that means like get off the chair. And I tend to, at the very least, walk around the room and then sit back down. I might make a cup of tea or something, but the idea is that you're still in that kind of so-called flow state. So that's what I use. I use the Pomodoro technique. You can look it up online. Now, if I'm writing fiction, I tend to write in a cafe. I like to be out of my house if possible. I have a writing partner. I'm going to talk about this in a bit. As the social life champion, you're not going to be surprised that I like doing things with other people, because writing is actually quite a lonely process because it's coming out of you. So I tend to work in, maybe if I'm writing fiction, then I'll do 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's my process. Other people's process is 5 minutes at 5 a.m. because that's the only time they have before all of the kids in the household goes crazy. That's fine. You have a really demanding job and you can only write for, 6-7 minutes during a lunch hour before you have another call. That's fine. It's the regularity that matters. And again, with me, I don't do it every day. I do need a break. Some people have to do it every day, but I would say the majority of the days in the week, you should do something. And the other thing to say, and this is not something I've heard a lot of people say, is in reality, I write seasonally. Okay, I'm trying to set up my business. I'm, you know, like I'm in the middle of a career shift. I travel a lot. So I tend to, my writing, if I'm writing fiction, tends to happen in bursts of like 3 or 4 months. And then I kind of have to leave the project and go back to it. So just to tell people not to panic if you can't do this all the time, but you definitely need to think about a chunk. So the next thing we want to talk about is overcoming blocks and obstacles. So one of the things we're going to talk about is what were some of the big challenges that people face. So Anna was going to ask me about what some of the challenges I faced when I was writing and whether I had any blocks or obstacles. So we'll talk about my feelings about writer's block a little bit later. But I do want to again share the fact that, like, of course, there were lots of times when I was writing a full-length novel, I had no idea where the story was going, what I was doing, whether any of this would kind of piece together. And I was feeling really alone in the process because I hadn't yet met my writing partner. I didn't know anybody else who was writing a novel. I'm, you know, my background is, you know, in politics and communications. I don't know anyone in the literary or publishing world at all. So the whole thing for me was like, you know, could sometimes really get overwhelming. And I think focusing on the integrity of the work when it comes to producing art is actually a really important thing to take you away from that. You know, that kind of, like I said, thinking like, what's the thing that I'm doing now when you're writing fiction, and not worrying about what you're going to have to deal with later, because that literally has to employ different parts of your head. So what the main thing that solved that isolation for me, as I was saying before, it's not a surprise, I'm sure, as the social life co-champion, that I like doing things with people. So that doesn't mean that I'm sharing my story necessarily with someone. I mean, that also was something that sometimes worked for me, but it was when I joined my first writing group in person in Buenos Aires when I was living there temporarily. And then I found another writers group when I was back in London. And it was through, you know, finding 2 other women who were also writing fiction. I mean, completely different projects than me. And they lived locally to me. And we met like, you know, at least weekly, and then, you know, 3 times a week, where we'd sit down and we'd use the Pomodoro technique and we'd just write. You know, we'd sometimes ask each other's questions, we'd sometimes read each other's stuff, but really it was the routine and support of knowing that you're sitting around other people who are doing the same thing as you. Now, that works for me because I'm a social person and I like doing things in groups, and I need that supportive space, and it needs to be ideally in person. Obviously, the pandemic made things difficult, but we were still meeting online after that. But those were with relationships that I had built in person. Again, some people are amazing building relationships online. I've learned that I can also do that after a life book. So, you know, I'm not saying it needs to be people in your same local area, but it is kind of nice if you can do that. If not, then there are all sorts of writing groups that you can meet online. The main thing that I'd be looking for is, again, the dependability of people, that they will show up. That's the most important thing for me. If you're constantly using your time trying to organize the next meetup and that kind of stress, then I wouldn't want that. I would want something regular. You know, I would say at least once a week, if not more often, you know, even if you're meeting online. Okay, this is again, like, my experience with writing is that how I get my thoughts flowing if I am in the middle of writing a piece, or if I'm developing a character, or if I'm writing and I don't know where this is going, is the opposite of going to a writer's retreat. So what I find gets my thoughts flowing is 2 things. One is being out in the actual world. and having the stimulus of, you know, what's happening outside my kind of focus on my laptop. And the second thing is physically moving. So I find that being in motion, whether I'm walking, whether I'm on a train, or whether I am on a plane, which tend to be my four favorite forms of transport, tend to work in terms of getting my head moving, is when I physically have some kind of moving. And like I said before, this might not work for you, but when I'm working on a specific project, i.e. when I was working with my novel, having certain music associated with that project is one of the things that I find like helps pull me back into that world most easily in terms of getting your flow. But again, I'd like to link back to what we were saying in the beginning, is that, you know, like it's all in the practice. There's a muscle, which is the writing muscle, and it's by practicing that you will get into a better state of flow, exactly like if you were doing yoga or stretching exercises for the first time. In the beginning, it'll feel really clunky. There'll be parts of your head that is involved in self-sabotage. Why, you know, I can't do this. I didn't learn to exercise when I was younger. I'm never going to be a supple person, etc. That kind of voice. And that's normal. And you can just say, you know, thank you very much. I can see that you're trying to sabotage. You can tell that voice, I'm see you're trying to sabotage me, but thank you, but no thank you. I'm going to continue to do this. So again, I would like to demystify the flow and say flow is in the practice. But having said that, there might be other things going on for you, right? So if there's a huge, if you have a problem, if there's an emotional block on the material that you're working on, and if you find that you really cannot write at all, like, for example, if you're writing your memoirs and you want to, you know, express yourself around a certain, you know, event that happened, and that event is painful, maybe the actual writing of it is being blocked by the fact that that's not something that you've resolved, or that isn't a relationship that you've resolved. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should use that as a way of stopping writing, or an excuse to stop writing. But sometimes there are things that are happening in our lives, or there are things that are happening with our emotions. And I would say that is where the block is, rather than in the exercise of writing, if that makes sense. And I think we're going to talk about that in a bit. Is that what you want to talk about next, Anna?
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, like, what advice would you give anyone who claims they have writer's block, or they're fearing writer's block? Because most of the time we're like, I have ideas, I want to start writing, but what if writer's block hits me and, you know, I stop writing, I can't find ideas, what happens next? So is there something called writer's block? What is it?
Right. Okay. So again, this is a concept. I mean, I have a strong opinion on this. I think that the concept of writer's block is probably pushed out by people who want to sell books on how to fix writer's block. That's not to say that the writing process can't at some points be really difficult. It can be, but I think it's the same kind of self-sabotage, procrastination, or not dealing with either a logistical problem. You know, maybe your kid is, you know, having a really rough time and is really ill, or, you know, you're thinking about logistics, or you've got this big problem of work, of not being able to free your headspace. I think it's quite similar to what happens in other work spaces that are cerebral and not manual. So again, it's important to not think that writer's block is a thing. Now, apart from that, again, this is a life book thing. I'm sure everybody here, whether you're new or a veteran of life book, have heard, you know, various different speakers talk about fear, you know, and overcoming the fear. So I would say that the fear of not succeeding, or the fear of not being able to write something or finish something or execute something that is new, that's a new skill, this is normal, guys. And, you know, we all have those fears. And every single time somebody does something new, you will have a part of you that's going, am I going to be able to do this? So we all have fears. and we need to not stop our fears from getting in the ways of our hope and dreams. It doesn't mean that this is always going to be easy, but, you know, let's not borrow worry from the future, and let's not self-sabotage our potential, you know, by kind of listening to that voice. I think it's, you know, you need to, if it's going on for months and months and months, maybe there's something else going there. But I don't feel like writer's block in itself is a specific thing that happens to writers. So, you know, like I said, if you're continuously coming to a standstill, approach the situation, I would say, with curiosity, and say, oh, look, you know, I've not been able to write for days. Like, is there an emotional block? Is there something else that's happening in my life? Or is this subject perhaps too painful and personal, and I should, for the moment, go away and write another thing, but keep writing, you know, write about whatever. So yeah, I guess my faith in everyone on this call and in Lifebook being able to write is about the fact that all humans have this potential to tell story. Like, telling stories is so fundamentally part of us. And if you have language, then you know, then you'll be able to write that in some way. And like I said, you know, I've said that quote at the beginning about the 30% creativity, 30% craft, and 40% stamina, you know, and not worrying about whether you're writing a bestseller at this stage, unless you're, you know, Stephen King or someone who's super experienced. Every single writer is, when you write the first draft, that's not what you see at the end. So maybe this is actually my second most important point here, which in the beginning I talked about writing and editing being completely different things. The book or the article or the memoir or whatever you produce, and this is my second most important point, is in the edit. So the thing that you see at the end, which goes out to the world, you know, to the publisher or to go up on the website or the blog post, that's in the edit. That's not what you need to worry about now. That you use editor's brain for, which is a completely different brain to the writing and the creativity and the engaging with the stories of your past, and, you know, your pains and your joys and all of that. So it's really important to try to not worry about the finished product, because the finished product is something that you work on afterwards, and you cannot get to that unless you fill the page with actual, you know, one word after another, after another, after another. So that would be my that's my second biggest tip, is to not worry about the finished product, because even the most amazing writer who's writing this incredible article that you read online, they had a first draft and no one got to see the first draft. Like, no one ever sees anybody's first draft. Okay, so you don't need to worry about that. And I think we're going to get on to doing some practice right now, aren't we, Anna?
Yes, that was really interesting. Thank you for sharing, Nadia. Before we jump into actually trying to write something, I wanted to add here that I believe, if, as you said, that we all are storytellers. We can tell stories. Everyone can tell stories. Some people are more creative than others with their stories, but you can tell what happened to you yesterday. You can tell me how your day went yesterday. So as long as you can put sentences together, you can write, right? That's basically what we're saying. And now we're going to do an activity, and Nadia's going to walk us through it. But I just want to remind everyone that when we talked about the writer's flow, even if you end up with, you start writing and you feel like there are no words coming to you, guess what? Listen to your brain. It's actually telling you, I don't find the words. I don't know what the next word is. Write that down. Those are words. Write that down.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And then more and more ideas will come from there. So yeah, let's get writing. So Nadia, tell us what the exercise is about before I open the 2-minute timer.
Hopefully everyone has a pen or pencil and paper, right? I have mine. I'm gonna get a sheet in my notebook. We're doing this as well. So the reason, just to explain this little bit here, is before we start, about why pen and paper. So this is not fetishizing some kind of, you know, Shakespearean idea of, oh, I have a quill and I am a writer. So that's not what we're doing here. But if you're getting started with writing, I highly, highly, highly recommend, from a scientific perspective, the use of your hands. Now, I know some of the younger generations might not be using their hands to write at all, but I hope that everyone here still, you know, remembers how to write by hand. And that's because there is a very specific connection between the brain and the use of our bodies in the production of ideas. So I would highly recommend, even if you're just getting started. I mean, I wrote my novel, you know, typing it up, but some of the ideas, my first ideas, were definitely down in a notebook. So I would recommend that. So that's the first thing. That's why we're doing pen and paper. So if you can, I would really urge you not to do this next one by writing, you know, with on your phone. So what we're going to do is an exercise in free writing. Anna and myself are going to do it as well. And remember, unless you want to share it, no one is going to see these words. Your aim is to write as many words as possible and fill your page. And if you fill your page and there's still time going for the 2 minutes, keep on writing. And what Anna said is right. So if you have an idea, because you're here because you want to write a memoir, or you have a story idea, or there's an article idea, or there's a blog piece, great, start with that. If you don't, it really doesn't matter. If you start writing, oh my goodness, I'm having to write this in this workshop with Lifebook, I don't know what I'm doing, I can hear the washing machine ping, oh, my husband's going to walk in any minute and think I'm crazy. It doesn't matter, because if you keep going through that, eventually something is going to come out. And that, even if it's 10 words out of 1,000 that end up being the nugget towards your best-selling novel, it's the flow, it's the practice, it's getting into that actual tactile world that we want. So if everybody is ready and they've got their writing implement and bit of paper, I've got mine, I hope we can start. So the timer is going to go on the screen, and as many words as possible in a line. Jen is ready. I hope everybody is ready.
Timer is
2
going.
minutes. Let's go. Let's go.
The time is up.
One more word. Here we go.
Finish those thoughts. Finish the thoughts. You know, if the timer goes off
Finish
and
your
you're
thoughts,
still
yeah.
writing, go writing. Still keep writing. I see people still writing. Oops. Ah.
Yeah. This is the good stuff, people.
Mm-hmm. Oops. It keeps popping up on my screen.
So, people are still looking down. Does this mean that you're right, and you're right in the middle of this amazing idea? Now you can't stop.
Yeah.
You can see Andreas is flexing his writing hand muscles there. I know the feeling. I tend to grip my pen if I have a really exciting idea, and I think, oh no, I need to relax that hand.
Yeah. Yvonne keeps going. I think she's gonna write a book before the end of this
Yvonne's gonna write a book.
Yeah.
Okay, should we carry on to the next bit, because I'm aware that we don't have very much time left. And yeah, and people might want to ask questions, so maybe we should
so
go
I
on
had
to the next
another
bit.
question about, like, you know, some of us haven't written a book yet. We're aspiring authors, so any advice for us on how to get started? Obviously we covered many things, right? The fears and all those things, but what other kind of tips you have for us to get started, to become authors?
Sure. Okay, so just before we go on to that, and also part of that, I should note that if you've enjoyed that, and I hope you did, you know, that 2-minute prompt, there are things called writing prompts online. If you literally Google writing prompts, you will find, and this is the best way to start writing if you don't know what you're yet going to write about, which, you know, it was in my case, I just knew I wanted to write something and then an idea came to me. But writing prompts are fantastic. And even if your practice becomes literally 5 minutes of free writing against either what's in your head, you know, getting your what's in your head down the page, or if you don't want to do that, go to a different writing prompt every day. And that might be something like, the writing prompt says, a man walks into a bar and the dog is serving the beers. Right? What's happened next? You know, or it might be something more like, your character comes home one day and finds something unexpected at home. Or, you know, and you can pick specific ones, like if you're specifically into a specific genre, then you can find those, or just go with random stuff. And it's a really good way to practice your writing muscle. So I would say look up writing prompts as number one piece of advice for aspiring authors if you're interested in writing fiction, rather than having a specific topic. So the second thing that I would to say, which is not actually something that other people say, or I've heard a lot, but I think made a huge difference to me, is getting yourself in contact with other writers. And that means, you know, maybe attend inspiring events and workshops online, get yourself exposed to that world of people who write, you know, dip your toe in that world. Because if you eventually want to get published, then there's so many budding writers out there. And sometimes by attending an event or finding a group, or, you know, browsing the different things that people are doing, that could inspire you. Now, sometimes for some people that might be overwhelming. You might be thinking, oh no, actually I need to live in my writer's bubble for the next 3 or 4 months. And, you know, and that's fine. But I do think there's something there in not feeling completely alone and knowing that there are other people who do that thing, right? Second one, we've talked about this a lot. Writing is in the practice. So show up to work. So this means trying a certain slot of just, let's do 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week. You know, if you can do that for 3 months running, that's a habit, you know, and then that goes into, for those who have been in Lifebook Mastery for some time, that becomes one of your 12 sacred choices, then fantastic. That's all we're looking for. You saw the amount of ideas that I'm sure you guys have come up with in 2 minutes. Well, imagine what 10 minutes is like, right? And then again, you don't have to do it by hand, but, you know, find what works for you. Also, I would say, try not to abandon an idea too soon. I would really give something a run of, you know, at least a few months. So I would say push through to the end, regardless of what that end is. And unfortunately, I can't tell you what that end is, but to try and commit to something and try and make it work. And we're talking about, again, the draft level. So I want to write a story, or I want to write a short story, or I want to write a memoir, or I want to write, you know, a piece of poetry. Like, that's what I mean by commit to the end of that thing, which might be a couple of pages or, you know, 300 pages. To just check the first time you're doing this that you're not entirely like sabotaging yourself and going, no, that's not good, I'm going to go over here, over here, over here, over here. The other thing I would do is that if you're into checking out what's happening in the world, is check out online competitions, because if you're a person who likes deadlines, there are lots of online competitions for short stories, flash fiction. Those are the kind of words you should look for, you know, poetry, you know, memoir. There's all sorts of stuff for people writing in English. And that might be a nice way to kind of jut yourself into a position where you're trying something. You know, if you know that in a couple of months, you need to submit for a competition for a 3,000 word piece, that might keep you going. Also, just to say at this stage that after when you're comfortable with the free writing, I would say there's two different ways to kind of write a work of fiction, and they're very different. The first one is to outline your project. So say you already have, or through your free writing, you think, I know exactly what this story is about. It's about these two characters. This is going to happen. This is the plot arc. You know, I've read all about how to make a good story fly. I'm going to outline my project because I know what's going to happen in it. That's great. There's lots of resources out there. I don't know how to do that. This is completely not my process. My process is a free writing one. I have no idea who are my characters, what they're going to look like, or what they're going to say until I start writing. So my characters in my novel all have a life of their own. Now I can imagine them as people in my head, and that's the magic. The magic is that you get to that at some point. Some people get to that through planning. I can't do that. I just free write and free write and free write, and that produces the fiction, which is also what, you know, there's two methodologies and writers use different ones. So those would be really my top tips for that. Yeah. Anything else you want to cover apart from the two books that I'd like to recommend that you want me to talk about, Anna, maybe very quickly?
That's all. We're almost there. Let's wrap it up so we can get some questions before we kind of close the session.
Sure. Yeah, very, very, very quickly. So like I said, in terms of the 30% of the craft, there's lots of books out there about how to outline, how to write. That's great if that's useful for you. Were not so useful for me. The two books that had a big influence on me, and if you could put those links in the chat, and then maybe we'll put them later with the recording. They are Becoming a Writer by Dorothy Brand, which is a 1970s or 80s book, which is about the separation of the editor and the writer's brain and the kind of magic of writing. And the other one is an amazing book called On Writing by Stephen King. And it's the second half of the book, which is about the amazingness of writing. So those are the two books that I recommend that worked for me, that inspired me to write long form fiction. But like I said, there's so many resources out there if you're looking for a specific thing, for prompts or ideas, or, you know, outlining or stuff like that. So, you know, I'll stop there because people might have questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nadia. This was really helpful. So today we learned that writer's block is just a fear, and we can overcome that. And if we want to identify as writers, like we want to embrace that identity, guess what? Writers write. So it has to be something we do daily as a practice, just like we do our exercises. We want to also be writing every single day. And I would like to add also something to when Nadia mentioned the prompts, one of the ways, if you don't want to do random prompts, if you want to work on a specific book, and if you want every day to write something toward that book, you can write an outline for that book, or you can ask people, you say, I'm writing about this topic. What are some of the questions you would like to read the answers to in that book? They will give you those prompts, and those are your prompts to write with. And the last thing I would say is identify when are you the most talkative in a group. Like a lot of times when there's a discussion, you're listening, but there's that one topic or a few topics that when come up, you just talk. You just talk incessantly. You know everything about it. Maybe you should write a book on that, because apparently you have the passion about it and you know it, right? So discover what that is. Discover what you're passionate about, what you know a lot of information about, and maybe that's the thing you want to write about next. So that will put you in the writer's flow. If we have any questions, please, let's go.
I just wanted to say I love how you separated writing and editing, because my mom was an editor and that's what I grew up with, and she writes as well, but I always try to put them together, and that's something I would not have known to separate. And is it better to have someone else edit your work, or yourself, or at a certain point when you think it's okay, then have someone edit it? Or could that kind of skew how they edit it?
Are you writing fiction or nonfiction, if you don't mind me asking you?
Non-fiction.
Like what your aspiration?
Yeah, it's
okay.
nonfiction.
So I think in both cases, what you need to do is to finish the work, or at least, you know, if it's nonfiction, then because of how it works in publishing, you don't actually have to submit a full book. That's if you're looking to publish, if you're looking to publish traditionally, which is a whole other workshop which we can talk about.
I was thinking more blogging, like blogging ideas.
Blogging, great. Okay, that's perfect. So if you're blogging, I would say I would write the piece, I would finish the piece, and then on another, if you're just getting started, on another day, and then when you become more experienced, another point in the day. But when you get started, on another day, as in a sleep between them, because that does a lot to your mind, I would then go and edit it, because you'll find yourself looking at the piece in a completely different way than if you were when you're writing it, because what you're trying to do now is to produce the stuff, and the thing that's going to produce the stuff is writer's brain. And while you're getting started, there's going to be that voice going, that's the wrong word, that's a stupid idea, that's not going to work, why did you write that, cross that out, forget that, that's right. This happens to everyone. So this is not where we're at, because we want to get you to a place where you can blog, where this is something you do regularly. So at this stage, on a different day is what I would say to you. And then if you want to take 3 or 4 blog pieces and get a beta reader, which is someone else, to say, hey, how am I framing these ideas? Do you think these work as a blog? Then that's great. But I would always go through one edit, at least myself, before showing it to someone else at the level of a blog post. If we're talking about long form fiction, then I would get to 5, 6, 7 edits, and then go to beta readers, and then go out to the world. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. No, that makes sense, because that's what stops me, is I'll go to the thesaurus or whatever and try to find the right word. Now I know, just find the right words later at the end.
Yeah. The next day.
Yeah. Yvonne, on Mondays, be the writer. On Thursdays, be the editor. Like, wear different hats.
Okay.
Natalie. Go ahead, Natalie.
Okay. We have a question. Yeah, go Natalie.
Actually, I don't have so much problems with writing with prompts. I mean, I love it, but I never get to finish a story or to build a story. I'm not very good at outlines. It sort of stifles my creativity. So it's the same, but I just wonder how to make a story. I just, you know, go with a flow, but then it stops, and then I get another idea of something else, but it doesn't build a story. Maybe it's for some other, other session, but this is what bothers me the most.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're writing fiction, right? This is fiction, Natalie. Yeah, okay. So no, thanks for the question. It's a big one. Like, what is a plot arc? Now, the short answer to the question is all human beings above the age of 7 know what a plot arc is. Because if I say, Natalie goes to the supermarket, buys some tomatoes, and goes home, that is a plot arc. So I think the key in the question there, which you didn't say, but you have written, is which would have people want to read further. That's editor brain. Don't worry about that. That's the editor brain telling you, oh my goodness, this isn't good enough. I understand what you mean about you looking at a work and saying, does this have a plot? But that's not the same as flow. That's what happens in the edit, because later you might look at something and say, what's the next thing that's going to happen? So it might be that you're writing, maybe you've written 3,000 words and it's like a nugget of an idea. But then when you go to, I put it in a drawer, go to it later, like the next day or the next week or whatever, time differential, depending on how much you've written, and then appraise it and say, I need something to happen now. And what you need is the scaffolding, like with the house, you need the scaffolding of something. When I first started writing, I had no plot. I can tell you that. It was just people doing things. But then when you start to edit it, then you think, I need to write I need something to happen here. Okay, I'm going to do that. And then you leave it and you apply your writer's brain and you get in that flow again. And then the next day or, 2 weeks later, you apply editor brain to it. So there's different kind of ways of doing it. But that thing of like, I don't know what people are going to want to read. When you write fiction, don't worry about what people want to read. It really has to be about the stuff that's coming out from here. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah, it does.
You're
It
so
does,
welcome.
because it just takes away the fear or just the
Pressure.
self-criticism, saying, okay, I when I reread what I write, it's lovely, but it just doesn't go anywhere. So I mean, that's what I'm saying now, but it does help. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anybody?
Or insight?
Yeah, anybody else? Or comments? Or techniques that worked for you, or sharing where you are. I know we lost some time to the technical difficulties, so I'm happy to stay on for another 5 minutes if people want to say things.
Yeah.
Andreas says takeaway. That blog post can be written in multiple days. Okay, I had a limiting belief that you must do this in a day. Yeah, okay. So no, thanks for sharing that, Andreas. And I'm happy that Yvonne also talked about blogging, because actually, a lot of people here might not be interested in, writing a book or whatever. You're talking about blogging. But I definitely think, again, remember that you're getting started. So this is not going to be the case. If you commit to this, in a year's time, you probably will be able to write a blog in a day. But when you're starting the practice, you have to get the flow first and then apply editorial, which is a critic, right? Because that's what an editorial head is. It has to be a critic. But while you're writing, that doesn't matter. What you want to do is be probably like, I want to start blogging. I want to free write, 5 or 6 ideas so that I have something to praise and go, is this what I want to do? And then maybe from that, you decide, actually, that's not what I want to do, but this is useful bits of writing. I might use them for something else later. But I think what you've touched on there, Andreas, is there something about, the quick, fast, like social media world that makes you think that you have to produce straight away. And even those people who are, producing, posts every day, they've trained themselves in that, right, to produce certain content. And it's all, again, it's all in the practice. Like, some people can head out and go running, 20 miles today, and if you haven't run before, you can't do that. So again, it's a practice and time thing. And allow yourself to kind of digest the ideas that you come up with.
Yeah, I
You're
want to add
welcome.
on to that. It's so important in this social media world to remember where we're at, right? We still don't compare yourself with others. Like a tree, like a 20-year-old tree might be giving fruit, but if you're a seedling, you can't expect to give fruit on day one. You need to nurture yourself. You need to practice every single day, like we talked in this workshop. Write every day, and some days you might come up with like maybe even the first day you might be in such a flow. You're like, wow, I wrote a blog post on day one, and then 100 days you might not come up with something good enough. It's okay. Just practice, 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 practice. That practice makes progress.
Exactly. And I'm so happy you brought that up. There's something else there, which is depending on the kind of thing that you're writing, my advice is to think about how you relate to information in the world, in the news cycle. For some people, maybe if you're writing nonfiction on a specific topic, you want to keep up to date with reading certain stuff because that will feed your mind. Maybe you're reading in the morning and you're writing in the evening. If you're writing fiction and you're deep into fiction or memoir, I would recommend that you engage with the idea of going on, this is John's terminology, John Butcher's terminology, a low information diet. I need to sometimes go on a low information diet. I was just doing a nonfiction project and a book proposal, and reading the news or being involved in what was happening in the world did not work for me. And the same goes sometimes when I'm writing fiction. Sometimes reading other fiction doesn't work for me because it starts to influence my characters. But again, it's different for different people. But I would say engage with the idea of how you're engaging with other media. I mean, personally, as a social life champion and someone who really likes engaging with humans, I hate social media. And I'm happy to say that I'm actually quite against it and what it does to your brain. And I don't think it is a necessity, and I don't use it. I think it fries your brain, but I understand that a lot of people, that's something they do day to day. But again, if you are on social media, then see how that relates to your daily practice with writing and how it might be, good or bad for it, in your specific case.
That's another topic. We'll do another interview with you on it, Nadia. I'm really interested about that one.
Which is funny because I've done a book on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
So I've done a book on Twitter and I'm like, I hate that world.
Yes, but it's a different story. We'll talk about that. Definitely, it has a lot of impact on our intellectual life. But yeah, definitely focus on all the points we mentioned today. Rewatch this recording once. I cut it and put it up in another format. Watch it again and take the notes again and focus on that. We'll have 3 more sessions this week on how to find out what we want to work on this week, this month, and also how we want to find the prompts or the outlines or whatever plots or whatever it is, so that we can enter into that flow state. And remember, just like Nadia said, when you're writing, you're the writer, you're not the editor, and also you're not the researcher. So there were tips on like reading other books and doing different, like engaging with or reading, getting some research depending on the type of thing you're writing. But it's not what you do when you're in the flow of writing. In the flow of writing, you just want to dump everything that's in your brain. And that's when you identify when there are gaps, when you need to do a research or when you need to do other things. And that's another time, not in that one block of writing time. That's when you just write whatever comes to mind, and whatever doesn't come to mind, you're just like blank, blank, blank. I can't come up with words. You just write that. And the last tip I want to give here is that if you want to take a break from writing, but you still want to engage with the ideas that you're going to write about, I think Nadia maybe failed to mention this, or I missed it when I was dealing with the technical stuff, is go for a walk. It will help you reshuffle ideas in your head, and then you come back and you're back into the flow. Because most of us, what we do is when we're stuck, we jump and start research, which actually makes things worse in our brain.
Or we go to the fridge.
Yeah.
Or we go to the fridge or the snack cupboard.
Yeah, just go for a
So
walk.
instead of that, go for a walk, even if it's a
Yes.
walk
Or
around your living
shower.
room. Okay.
Yeah, or take a shower. Best place for ideas, walk and shower.
True. Okay. And just to say that I'm also available, like you can message me anytime on the Lifebook platform if you've got anything you want clarification for. I am available to help my fellow Lifebookers. Okay.
Yay. Well,
Great.
thank you so much, Nadia. This was a really helpful workshop.
Thank you,
And
Anna.
I hope
Thanks,
to see
everyone.
everyone participate in this month's challenge. Let's write a book or maybe 28 blog posts. I don't know, whatever it is you want to write. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, guys.